The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a swirl of snow and lamplight. Patricia Hartwell clutched her carpet bag tighter, fingers numb despite her gloves. Christmas Eve in Montana territory was colder than anything Boston had prepared her for. She descended carefully, boots finding purchase on packed snow. Cedar Bend Station was small but cheerful pine boughs draped over the doorway, candles flickering in frosted windows. She scanned the small crowd for a tall rancher named George Mitchell. Instead, she found 5 children. They stood beside a waiting sleigh like stairsteps, bundled in mismatched coats and scarves. The oldest, a girl of perhaps 11, stepped forward with trembling formality. Miss Patricia Hartwell. Her voice carried the weight of someone far older. Yes, Patricia's rehearsed greeting died. Where is Mr. Mitchell? We're the Mitchells. The girl attempted a smile. I'm Ruth. These are my brothers and sisters, Jacob, Thomas, Lily, and Samuel. We've come to fetch you home. Home. The word hung in the frozen air like a promise or a lie. The younger children stared with barely concealed desperation. Little Samuel, no more than 4, pressed against Ruth's side. His eyes were huge in his thin face. But Mr. Mitchell, your father, he was supposed to meet me. Patricia looked past them, half expecting a tall man to emerge from the shadows. Daddy's at the ranch. Ruth gestured toward the sleigh with practiced authority. It's 6 miles. We should go before the snow gets worse. Something felt wrong. The children's nervousness went beyond shyness. They watched her with the intensity of gamblers waiting for cards to turn. But the stagecoach was already pulling away. Her trunk was being loaded onto the Mitchell sleigh, and 5 pairs of eyes pleaded silently. All right, Patricia said slowly. Take me to your father. Relief flooded Ruth's face. The children scrambled into the sleigh with sudden energy. Patricia settled onto the bench beside Ruth, who took up the reins with surprising competence. As they drove through the snowy darkness, the children's chatter filled the silence. They spoke over each other, voices bright with forced cheer. We decorated the whole house, Lily announced. Even made paper chains. Jacob carved new animals for the nativity, Thomas added. Daddy will be so surprised. Samuel whispered. That word again, surprised. Patricia's unease deepened. You wrote such lovely letters about Cedar Bend. She ventured. About your father's ranch, the mountains, we cleaned everything twice. Ruth interrupted. The cabin's never been so neat. The sleigh crested a small rise. Below, nestled in a valley, a ranch house appeared, small but sturdy, smoke rising from its chimney. Lamplight glowed warm in the windows. A Christmas wreath hung on the door. It looks like home, Patricia whispered, surprising herself. Ruth's grip on the reins tightened. We're praying it will be. The words sent a chill through Patricia that had nothing to do with the Montana wind. George Mitchell emerged from the barn carrying an armload of firewood. He looked up at the sound of the sleigh and froze. His face cycled through confusion, then recognition, then something close to horror. Ruth. His voice cracked. Who is this? The children tumbled from the sleigh in a wave of nervous energy. Ruth helped Patricia down, then stood between them like a shield. Daddy, this is Miss Patricia Hartwell. Ruth's chin lifted with desperate courage. From Boston. She came to marry you. The firewood tumbled from George's arms, logs scattered across the snow. She came to what did you do inside the warm cabin. Patricia sat at a scrubbed pine table while George made coffee with shaking hands. The children huddled near the Christmas tree, pretending not to listen. Ruth stood before her father, shoulders squared. We wrote the letters, Daddy. Her voice barely held. All of them. We used your name, copied your signature from the store ledger. Miss Patricia answered. And we invited her to come. George's face had gone white. He turned to Patricia, words stumbling. I am so sorry. I had no idea. I would never. This is unconscionable. He He gripped the back of a chair. I'll pay your passage back. Naturally. Tomorrow, if possible. I cannot apologize enough for what my children... Why, Patricia's question cut through his stammering. Why didn't you write yourself, Mr. Mitchell? George flinched as if struck. His eyes went to a small portrait on the mantel, a woman with kind eyes and dark hair. My wife died 2 years ago. The words came rough. I can't... He couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Patricia looked around the cabin with new eyes. The scrubbed floors that showed pale wear patterns, the mended curtains, stitches careful but uneven. The Christmas tree decorated with paper chains and carved animals, the table set for 6 instead of 5. One chair looked newer than the others, freshly sanded, recently painted. An addition. Please don't be angry at us, Miss Patricia. Lily's small voice broke the silence. We just wanted bed now. George's voice was harsh. All of you. The children fled up the narrow stairs, all except Samuel, who broke away from his siblings and ran to Patricia instead. He climbed into her lap, burying his face against her shoulder. Please don't go, Miss Patricia. His body shook. We cleaned everything. We'll be good. Please. Patricia's throat closed. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This child's need was a physical weight. George gently pried his son away. Samuel, upstairs. The boy went, tears streaming. Patricia and George sat in terrible silence, the fire crackling between them. I spent everything I had to come here, Patricia said finally. My savings, my position at the dress shop. I have $3 left and nowhere to return to. George's head dropped into his hands. I'll pay for everything, every cent. It's the least. They love you very much. Patricia's voice was soft. Your children, to do something this desperate. They had no right. No. Patricia stood, bone-tired. But perhaps they saw something you couldn't. She climbed the stairs to the small guest room Ruth had shyly indicated. Through the thin walls, she heard muffled crying, children's voices whispering comfort to each other. And downstairs, a man's broken breathing as he sat alone in the dark. Patricia couldn't sleep. The bed was comfortable, the quilts warm. But her mind spun like a prairie dust devil. She'd left Boston with such hopes. A husband, a home, children of her own. She'd memorized every detail from the letters, the mountains, the ranch. George's careful descriptions of frontier life. All lies. Written by desperate children. She should be furious, should demand that passage back east and never look back. But lying in the darkness, she kept seeing 5 pairs of eyes. The careful way Ruth had braided Lily's hair, fingers clumsy but trying. How Thomas held Samuel's hand in the sleigh. Jacob's protective stance near his younger siblings. Children raising themselves, motherless, with a father drowning in grief. Near midnight, she heard footsteps on the stairs. She rose, wrapped a shawl around her nightgown, and descended. George sat by the dying fire, staring at the flames. He didn't look up when she entered. Can't sleep either, she said quietly. He gestured to the chair across from him. The new chair. Her chair. Patricia sat. I grew up in an orphanage, she said into the silence. St. Catherine's Home for Girls in Boston. I lived there from age 6 until I turned 16. George looked at her then. I never had family, never belonged anywhere. She pulled the shawl tighter. When I saw your advertisement, when I thought I saw your advertisement, I didn't dream of romance. I dreamed of belonging, of mattering to someone, of having a place that was mine. I'm sorry. George's voice was rough. You deserved better than this deception. Why haven't you moved forward? Patricia asked. 2 years is a long time to grieve. George was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Martha died giving birth to Samuel. The words came slow, painful. I held her hand while she slipped away. She made me promise. Promise I'd take care of them. Our babies. He stared at his calloused hands. I've been married to a ghost. I see her in every corner of this house. I hear her voice when the wind blows. And Ruth. His voice broke. Ruth has her mother's eyes, her mother's way of standing. She's 11 years old, and she's been raising her siblings because I've been too broken to do it myself. Patricia's chest ached. You're not the only one who's alone. Mr. Mitchell. She leaned forward. Your children are orphans too. They have a father, but they've lost you to grief. George flinched. They love you so much they forged letters and summoned a stranger because they couldn't bear to watch you fade away. Patricia's voice gentled. That took courage and desperation. I don't know how to stop grieving. The confession was barely audible. Maybe you don't stop. Maybe you just learn to live alongside it. They sat in silence as the fire died to embers. Finally, George spoke. I'll arrange passage for you day after tomorrow. Give you time to rest. And I'll pay you wages for I'll stay through Christmas. Patricia surprised herself with the decision. For the children, they prepared so carefully. I won't ruin their holiday. George's head came up sharply. You'd do that after what they did? After what they tried to do? Patricia stood, suddenly exhausted. They tried to save their family. That's nothing to punish. She started toward the stairs, then paused. I came here for a dream, Mr. Mitchell. It may have been built on lies, but the need behind it, yours and mine, that's real. She climbed the stairs before he could respond. In her room, Patricia hung her traveling coat on the peg behind the door. A small gesture, temporary, but in the darkness downstairs, George Mitchell stared at that coat for a long time, and for the first time in 2 years, he whispered a prayer. Martha, if you're listening, I don't know what to do, but these children, our children, they're drowning, and maybe, just maybe, you sent help. The fire popped. The wind rattled the windows, and outside, snow continued to fall, covering everything in white. Patricia woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of whispers. She dressed quickly, braided her hair, and descended to find all 5 children frozen in guilty tableau. Ruth stood at the stove, clearly having attempted breakfast. The results were mixed burned biscuits, undercooked bacon, and eggs that resembled leather more than food. We wanted to make you breakfast, Ruth said miserably, to thank you for staying. Patricia surveyed the kitchen disaster, then rolled up her sleeves. Lesson 1, she said. Bacon cooks slow, eggs cook fast, and biscuits need a gentle hand. She worked alongside Ruth, showing rather than telling. The other children crept closer, watching with starved attention. My mama made good biscuits, Lily ventured. I'm sure she did. Patricia's voice was gentle. Would you like to learn? Lily nodded eagerly. By the time George came in from morning chores, the table was set properly. Biscuits steamed in a basket. Bacon lay crisp on a platter. Eggs were fluffy and golden. He stopped in the doorway, staring. The children helped. Patricia said, They're quick learners. George's throat worked. He took his seat at the head of the table, children scrambling to their places. Patricia hesitated, then sat in the 6th chair. Samuel immediately climbed from his seat into her lap. Samuel. George's voice was sharp. Mind your manners. It's all right. Patricia settled the boy against her. If it doesn't bother you. What could George say? That it bothered him immensely to see his youngest son cuddling a stranger. That every maternal gesture Patricia made felt like a blade between his ribs. He said nothing, just bowed his head and spoke grace, voice rough, after breakfast. Patricia helped Lily braid her hair. The girl sat perfectly still, hardly breathing, as if afraid sudden movement would break the spell. "Your hair's like silk," Patricia murmured. "Mama used to braid it every morning." Lily's voice was wistful. "Ruth tries, but her fingers aren't as gentle. Ruth's done beautifully, keeping you all together. She cries sometimes, at night, when she thinks we're asleep." Patricia's hands stilled, then continued braiding. "That's because she loves you, and love is heavy sometimes." George watched from the doorway, unnoticed. Watched Patricia's patient fingers, Lily's relaxed shoulders. Watched his daughter's face lose its perpetual tension. Something in his chest cracked. Around noon, wagons began arriving. Neighbors coming with Christmas greetings and poorly disguised curiosity. Mrs. Henderson was first, bustling in with a cake and sharp eyes. "George Mitchell, I didn't know you were courting." Her tone carried accusation and interest in equal measure. George opened his mouth. No words coming. "The children wrote such lovely letters about Cedar Bend," Patricia said smoothly. "I couldn't resist visiting for the holidays. Such a beautiful country you have here." "Visiting?" Mrs. Henderson's eyes narrowed. "For the holidays. Miss Patricia's from Boston," Ruth added quickly. "She's a seamstress. She's been teaching me to make proper stitches." The lie layered on lies, but it satisfied Mrs. Henderson enough that she turned her attention to dispensing advice and gossip. Other families came and went. Patricia moved through the social dance with surprising grace, deflecting questions, complimenting children, admiring Mrs. Henderson's cake. George watched her work, watched how naturally she fit into his home, his life, how right she looked at his table, how terrifying that rightness felt. That evening, after neighbors left and children were occupied with new gifts and games, George found Patricia alone in the kitchen. "Thank you." He picked up a dish towel. "For covering, for not telling them about how your children forged letters and I'm a fool." Patricia's tone was light, but her hands trembled slightly as she washed plates. "You're not a fool." George started drying. "You're kind, kinder than we deserve." Their hands brushed, reaching for the same plate. Both froze. The touch was electric, wrong, necessary. George pulled away first. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't what?" Patricia's voice was soft but challenging. "Shouldn't feel alive. George shouldn't notice that I'm here. That your children are happy for the first time in how long?" George gripped the towel. "It's only been 2 years. 2 years is both forever and not nearly long enough." Patricia turned to face him. "But your children are growing up. They're not going to wait for you to finish grieving." The truth of it hit like a fist. "I don't know how," George whispered. "I don't either." Patricia's eyes were bright. "But maybe we could figure it out together." The moment stretched between them, fragile and weighted with possibility. Then Samuel called from upstairs, and the spell broke. George fled to the barn. Patricia stood alone in the kitchen, heart racing. Outside, snow began to fall again. Inside, a fire burned steady, and at the table, 6 chairs waited. The days after Christmas blurred into routine. Patricia found herself falling into rhythm with the household wake early. Help Ruth with breakfast. Teach Lily her letters. Referee the boys' arguments. Rock Samuel when nightmares woke him. She tried to maintain boundaries, reminded herself she'd promised only through Christmas. The holiday had passed. She should demand that passage east. But every morning, she woke to children's laughter. Every evening, she sat at that table with 6 plates, 6 cups, 6 people. And every night, she and George talked by the fire after children slept. He told her about Martha, not the idealized saint he'd been worshiping, but the real woman, stubborn, funny, terrible at cooking, brilliant with the ranch accounts, a woman he'd loved deeply and still missed. Patricia told him about St. Catherine's, about Sister Margaret who'd taught her to read, about sharing a bed with 3 other girls, about the cold terror of turning 16 and being sent out into the world alone. "You never had anyone," George said one night, voice wondering. "No." Patricia stared at the flames. "I thought I was used to it, but being here, with your family, it's showed me what I've been missing." George was quiet. "Then, Ruth told me you've been teaching her proper seams, that you could make a living anywhere with skills like yours." "I could?" Patricia looked at him. "I could leave tomorrow, find work in any town, start over." "But you haven't." "No." She held his gaze. "I haven't." The air between them thickened with unspoken things. George leaned forward. "Patricia." Daddy Ruth's voice from the stairs. Samuel's asking for water. The moment shattered. George rose, tending to his son. Patricia climbed to her room alone, but as she undressed for bed, she heard George's voice through the floorboards, heard him reading to Samuel, his tone gentle, heard the boy's questions and George's patient answers. He was waking up, thawing. The man who'd been frozen in grief was slowly, painfully, coming back to life. And Patricia was falling in love with all of them, the children, the ranch, the life she'd never dared to hope for. The next evening, after a dinner of venison stew and fresh bread, Thomas challenged Jacob to checkers. The boys set up the board with serious faces. "Miss Patricia, will you play the winner?" Jacob asked. "Only if you promise not to go easy on me." "We won't." Thomas grinned. "Ruth says you're smart." Patricia caught Ruth's eye. The girl smiled, shy but genuine. George sat in his chair by the fire, supposedly mending harness leather. But his hands had stilled. He was watching Patricia braid Lily's hair while Samuel dozed in her lap, listening to her gentle commentary on the checker game, watching his family come back to life. And the terror of it choked him. Later, when children were finally asleep, Patricia found George in the barn. "You're hiding," she said without preamble. He didn't deny it. Just kept brushing down the horse with methodical strokes. "I'm staying for the children," Patricia continued. "That's what I told myself, but it's not true anymore." George's hands stilled. "I'm staying because I love them. I love this hard, cold, beautiful place. I love your house and your chickens and even your drafty barn." She moved closer. "And I'm starting to love you, George Mitchell. And that terrifies me." "Patricia." His voice broke on her name. "But I won't stay for gratitude." She stood her ground. "I won't stay because you feel guilty or obligated. And I won't stay if you're still married to a ghost." George turned to face her. His eyes were red. "I don't know how to want anything anymore. I'm afraid if I reach for happiness, I'll lose it. Lose you. Just like I lost Martha." Patricia said the name gently. "You're afraid you'll lose me like you lost Martha." He nodded, unable to speak. "That's the risk. George, that's what love costs." Patricia's eyes shone. "But the alternative is this half-life, this existence where you breathe but don't live. I have 5 children, a failing ranch, debts, nothing to offer except everything I've ever wanted." Patricia's voice was fierce now. "Don't you understand this is my dream? You and your children and this life. I don't need grand gestures or promises. I just need to know, do you want me here?" George stared at her. This brave, fierce woman who'd traveled 2,000 miles on a lie and stayed anyway, who'd loved his children without hesitation, who was offering him a second chance he didn't deserve. "Yes," he whispered. "God help me. Yes, but I'm so afraid." "Then be afraid." Patricia stepped closer. "Be afraid while I stay. Be afraid while we build this together. But don't send me away because you're too scared to try." She left him in the barn, heart pounding. George stood alone in the hay-scented darkness, tears finally falling. Above, in the house, a lamp glowed warm in the kitchen window. 6 chairs around a table, waiting. Patricia woke to silence. Not the comfortable quiet of a sleeping house, but something heavier. She dressed quickly, descended the stairs. The kitchen was cold. George had been up for hours, she could tell by the banked fire and empty coffee pot. But he hadn't woken her or the children. Ruth appeared, worry creasing her young face. "Daddy's in the barn. He won't talk to me." Patricia's stomach dropped. She found him mucking stalls with grim determination, his back rigid. "George, I'll arrange for the stagecoach." He didn't turn around. "It comes through day after tomorrow. I'll pay your fare to anywhere you want to go." The words landed like blows. "I don't understand. Last night you said I said too much." George's voice was harsh. "I let myself forget what's right. You came here under false pretenses. I can't ask you to stay based on emotion and need. It's not fair to you. Shouldn't I decide what's fair to me?" "No." He finally turned, and his face was a mask. "I'm deciding for both of us. You deserve better than a broken man and 5 needy children." Patricia's hurt transformed to anger. "You're a coward." George flinched. "You're so scared of being happy that you'd rather send away the best thing that's happened to this family. In 2 years." Her voice shook. "Your children wrote those letters because they were desperate. They saw their father drowning and tried to save him. And you're going to punish them for it by sending me away. I'm protecting them. And you're protecting yourself." Patricia's eyes blazed. "From having to risk your heart again. From having to live..." She turned and walked back to the house, spine straight. Inside, 5 children waited with terrified faces. "Is Daddy sending you away?" Lily's voice was small. Patricia couldn't lie. "Yes." Samuel burst into tears. Ruth's face crumpled. Jacob and Thomas looked stricken. "But you said you loved us," Ruth whispered. "I do." Patricia knelt, gathering them close. "I love you all so much, but your father, he's too afraid right now. And I can't stay where I'm not wanted." "We want you." Samuel sobbed against her shoulder. "I know, sweetheart, I know." That afternoon, Patricia packed her carpet bag, folded the clothes she'd hung so carefully in the wardrobe, wrapped the few possessions she'd unpacked. The children shadowed her like mourners at a wake. Downstairs, George sat alone at the table, staring at the empty 6th chair. The chair he'd sanded and painted himself after his children's deception came to light. The chair that had held Patricia for meals and conversations and quiet mornings. Mrs. Henderson's words echoed in his head. "That woman's a blessing." George Mitchell. "Don't be fool enough to let her go." But what if he let himself love her and lost her? What if he failed her like he'd failed Martha? What if? What if? What if? Fear was easier than hope. That evening, Patricia made dinner one last time. She didn't speak to George, just set plates mechanically, ladled stew, cut bread. The children ate in silence. Samuel cried quietly into his food. George couldn't swallow a bite. After dinner, Patricia cleaned up alone. George disappeared to the barn again. That coward's refuge. Ruth found him there as darkness fell. "I hate you." Her voice was cold, shocking from his usually dutiful daughter. George's head snapped up. "Ruth, you're going to let her leave. You're too scared to be happy again. So you're sending away the best thing that's happened to us. You don't understand. I understand everything." Ruth's eyes were Martha's eyes, looking at him with disappointment that cut to bone. "Mama died. It was terrible. We all miss her. But she wouldn't want this. Daddy, she wouldn't want you to be alone forever." "How do you know what she'd want?" "Because she loved us." Ruth's voice broke. "And love means wanting people to be happy. even when you're gone." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Miss Patricia is leaving tomorrow. And when she goes, you're going to lose more than a housekeeper or a helper." Ruth met his eyes. "You're going to lose the woman who loves you, who loves us, and will never forgive you for it." She left him alone in the dark. George sank onto a hay bale, head in his hands. Upstairs, Patricia lay awake, staring at ceiling beams she'd memorized, listening to Lily cry herself to sleep in the next room, hearing Ruth's muffled sobs through the wall. "This is the right thing," George had said. If it was right, why did it feel like dying? George didn't sleep, just sat in the cold barn, watching his breath fog in the pre-dawn darkness. He'd been here before, this crushing weight. The night Martha died, he'd sat exactly here, unable to face the house where her body lay, unable to face children who'd need him when he had nothing left to give. He'd survived then. He'd survived this. Except Ruth's words kept echoing. Mama wouldn't want this. Would Martha want him to be alone? To let grief win? Or would she want her children raised by someone who loved them, want George to find happiness again? Even if that happiness wasn't her inside the house. Another drama was unfolding. Ruth had called a sibling meeting in the boys' room. 5 children sat in a circle, faces grim. "If grown-ups won't fix this, we will," Ruth declared. "How?" Jacob asked. "Daddy's decided. He's stubborn as a mule." "Then we make him listen." Ruth's jaw set. "We make him see what he's losing." At dawn, they descended on the barn in force. George looked up to find 5 children blocking the door, arms crossed. "We need to talk," Ruth said. "Not now. You need to listen." Ruth's voice cracked with authority. "We're your children. We have a right to be heard." George slowly straightened. Something in Ruth's stance, so like Martha, made him pause. "I remember Mama," Ruth began. "I was 9 when she died. I remember her laugh and her songs and how she smelled like bread and lavender. She was wonderful, Daddy, but she's gone." George flinched. "And we're still here." Ruth's voice strengthened. "We need a mother now, not someday, not when you're done grieving. Now." Jacob stepped forward. "Miss Patricia doesn't try to replace Mama. She just loves us. Can't that be enough?" "I'm tired of being sad all the time," Thomas added, voice small. Lily spoke next, her words devastating in their simplicity. "Miss Patricia's hugs are warm, and she makes my hair pretty, and she doesn't cry when she thinks we're asleep." Finally, Samuel, the boy who'd never known Martha, who'd been raised by a father drowning in grief and a sister too young for such burdens. "I don't remember Mama," he whispered. "Miss Patricia is the only Mama I know. Please don't send her away. Daddy, please." George's vision blurred. His children stood before him brave, honest, breaking his heart with their clarity. "I loved your mother so much," he managed. "Letting go feels like betraying her." "Mama wouldn't want you alone forever," Ruth said softly. "She'd want us happy, all of us, including you." The truth of it crashed over him. Martha had been generous, fierce in her love. She wouldn't want him frozen, wouldn't want their children suffering because he was too afraid to live. "She's packing," George said hoarsely. "Patricia's leaving this morning." "Then stop her," Ruth urged. "Before it's too late." George ran, burst through the barn door, across the snowy yard, into the house. Patricia stood in the front hall, carpetbag in hand, coat buttoned. The stagecoach wouldn't arrive for hours, but she couldn't stay in this house another minute. "Wait." George skidded to a stop. "Please wait." Patricia's face was guarded. "I've already said goodbye to the children. Don't make this harder." "I've been a fool." The words tumbled out. "A coward. Everything you said was right." I've been so afraid of losing someone again that I was willing to lose you without even trying. George, I'm not asking you to stay for the children. He moved closer, voice breaking. I'm asking for me, because when I imagine you leaving, it's not Martha I'm losing again, it's you. And I can't. I don't want to lose you. Patricia's eyes shone. I told you before. I won't stay for guilt or duty. I know. George reached for her hand, held it carefully. Your children already chose me, George. Now you choose. The words hung between them, a challenge, an invitation. George Mitchell, who'd been frozen for 2 years, who'd built walls around his heart to keep the pain out, he made a choice. I choose you. His voice was rough, honest. I choose us. If you'll have a broken-down widower with 5 children and more ghosts than good sense. Patricia dropped her carpetbag, stepped close, kissed his cheek tender, claiming, promising. I came here for a family, she whispered. Looks like I found one. George pulled her close, shoulders shaking with sobs he'd held back for years. Grief and joy and terror and hope all flowing together. Patricia held him, steady, sure. The children erupted from their hiding places behind furniture, at the top of stairs, peeking around corners. They rushed forward in a wave of hugs and tears and laughter. Samuel tackled Patricia's legs. Lily wrapped arms around her waist. The boys pressed close. Ruth hugged both adults, crying happy tears. For the first time in 2 years, George Mitchell laughed. Really laughed. The sound filled the small house like sunlight. Does this mean you're staying? Samuel asked, face pressed against Patricia's skirts. Yes, sweetheart. Patricia ran her fingers through his hair. I'm staying. Forever, Lily pressed. Patricia looked at George. He nodded, eyes red but clear. Forever. Patricia promised. Outside. Snow began to fall again, but inside. The fire burned warm, and 6 chairs waited at the table, ready to become a family. 1 week later, Cedar Bend's small church filled with neighbors and well-wishers. Patricia stood in the back room, smoothing her dress a simple blue wool that Mrs. Henderson and the other women had helped alter. You're shaking, Ruth observed, adjusting Patricia's hair. I'm nervous. Patricia smiled at the girl. That's allowed, isn't it? Daddy's nervous, too. He dropped his collar stud 3 times. They shared a laugh. Then Ruth grew serious. Thank you, she whispered, for staying, for choosing us. Patricia pulled her into a fierce hug. Thank you for being brave enough to write those letters. You saved your father. You saved all of us. The church was simple but beautiful. Pine boughs decorated the pews. Candles flickered on the altar. The whole town had turned out curious, supportive, ready to witness George Mitchell finally step back into life. Patricia walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away, no family to stand for her. But 5 children waited at the front, beaming in their best clothes. And George stood beside the minister, eyes locked on her. She'd never felt less alone. The ceremony was brief. George's voice shook as he spoke his vows. I promise to honor you, cherish you, and choose you. Every single day. Patricia's vows were equally simple. I promise to build a home with you, to mother your children as my own, and to believe in our future, no matter what comes. When the minister pronounced them married, George kissed her gentle, reverent, a promise of more to come. The reception at the ranch house was loud and joyful. Neighbors brought food and music. Children ran wild. Mrs. Henderson's cake sat proudly on the table. At one point, George pulled Patricia aside into the quiet of the barn. I have something for you. His hands trembled as he produced a small box. Inside was a locket. Gold. Delicate. Worn with age. Patricia's breath caught. George, is this... It was Martha's. He opened it, showing her the tiny photograph inside. A young woman with kind eyes and dark hair. She was part of my story, but you're my future. Patricia stared at the image, not threatened, not hurt, just honored. I want you to have it, George continued, so our children remember where they came from and where we're going. Patricia's eyes filled. You're sure I don't want to? I'm sure. George's voice was steady. She was their mother. She gave them life. Loved them first. But you chose them. Chose us. That's just as precious. Patricia closed her hand around the locket. I'll treasure it, and I'll tell them about her. The woman who gave them life, who loved them so well they knew what real love looked like. George's composure cracked. He wept against her shoulder, grief and joy and relief finally flowing together after 2 years of being dammed up. Patricia held him. Let him grieve. Let him heal. It's all right, she murmured. I've got you. We've got each other. When they returned to the house. The celebration was in full swing. Samuel ran up, grabbing Patricia's hand. Come dance, Mama. The word stopped her cold. Mama. Not Miss Patricia, not ma'am. Mama. George caught her eye across the room, smiled through tears. Ruth pulled out a fiddle someone had brought. Music filled the small house. Patricia danced with Samuel, with Jacob, with Thomas, with Lily. Laughed until her sides ached. Finally, as sunset painted the windows gold, the neighbors began departing. Promises to visit. Congratulations. Well wishes. Mrs. Henderson was last to leave. She cornered George at the door. You did right. George Mitchell. That woman's a blessing. Don't you forget it. I won't, George promised. Believe me, I won't. When the house finally quieted, 6 people sat down to dinner together. George pulled out the 6th chair for Patricia. She sat, and the gesture felt like coronation. Who's saying grace? Jacob asked. I will. George bowed his head. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong. Thank you for bringing Patricia to us, for giving us a second chance at being a family, for hope, and for love that's stronger than fear. Amen. 5 voices chorused. Patricia looked around the table, at children who'd chosen her, at a man who'd found courage to choose her back, at the life she'd built from lies and desperation and stubborn hope. Samuel climbed into her lap, as had become his habit. Lily leaned against her shoulder. Ruth served stew with confident hands. Jacob and Thomas argued good-naturedly over biscuits. Normal. Ordinary. Everything she'd ever wanted. George caught her eye across the table, mouthed 2 words, thank you. Patricia smiled, mouthed back, we're home. 3 months later. Spring came to Montana Territory. Snow melted into mud. Mud into green. The world transformed from white to every shade of living color. Patricia's garden was already planted herbs near the kitchen door, vegetables in neat rows, wildflower seeds scattered along the fence. The children had helped, their laughter and bickering a soundtrack she'd learned to love. She straightened from weeding, pressing a hand to her lower back. The cabin door opened and George emerged, 2 cups in hand. Thought you could use a break. He handed her coffee, still hot. You're spoiling me, Patricia teased. Getting even for all the ways you've spoiled us. They sat on the porch steps, shoulders touching, watching the children play in the yard. Ruth was teaching Lily to braid wildflowers. Jacob and Thomas were building something complicated with sticks and string. Samuel chased chickens with more enthusiasm than success. Ruth's been smiling more, George observed. She's 11. She should be playing, not raising her siblings. She did a remarkable job, considering She did. Patricia squeezed his hand. But she shouldn't have had to. George was quiet a moment. I'm sorry, for those 2 years, for what I put them through. Stop apologizing. Patricia's voice was gentle but firm. You were grieving. You did the best you could. And now we're all doing better. Because of you. Because we chose each other. Patricia turned to face him. Do you regret it? This life, me? Never. George's answer was immediate, fierce. Best decision I ever made, even if I needed 5 meddling children to make it for me. Patricia laughed. The sound still surprised her sometimes how easily joy came now. Do you, George asked, regret coming here staying? I came here for a dream, Patricia said slowly. A fantasy built on forged letters and desperation. What I found was better reality. Hard work and tired backs and children who track mud across clean floors. That's better. It's mine. Patricia's voice was soft. This life, this family, you. It's messy and imperfect and nothing like I imagined, but it's real, and it's ours. George pulled her close, kissed her forehead. I love you. Patricia Mitchell. I love you too. Samuel's shriek interrupted them. He'd caught a chicken and didn't know what to do with it. The bird squawked indignantly. Thomas and Jacob collapsed laughing. I should rescue that poor hen, Patricia said, not moving. Probably. George didn't move either. They sat a moment longer, savoring the peace. That evening, the family gathered for dinner, as had become their ritual. 6 chairs. 6 plates. 6 people. Ruth lit the lamp at the center of the table. Its glow pushed back the twilight, made the small room warm and golden. Patricia dished out stew while George poured milk. Samuel chattered about the bird's nest he'd found. Thomas and Jacob argued about who got the last biscuit. Lily leaned against Patricia's shoulder, content and quiet. Outside, the Montana sky blazed with sunset gold and pink and purple stretching to forever. Inside, the lamp glowed steady. The fire crackled. Voices rose and fell in comfortable rhythm. George caught Patricia's eye across the table. She smiled not the desperate hope of those first days, but something deeper. Satisfaction. Peace. Love earned through choice and work and daily recommitment. This was what home felt like. Patricia thought, not a place you were born to, but a place you built. Brick by brick, choice by choice, with people who chose you back. Martha's locket hung around her neck. Not a burden or a competition, but a connection. The past honored, integrated, made part of their story rather than a ghost haunting it. More stew, Mama, Samuel asked, holding up his bowl. Please, Patricia corrected gently, ladling another helping. Please, Samuel echoed, then demolished the food with single-minded focus. Ruth caught Patricia's eye, smiled. The weight of being little mother had lifted. She was 11 again, allowed to be a child. After dinner, after dishes, after children were finally in bed, Patricia and George stood at the window. Spring night sounds drifted through crickets, a distant owl, the soft lowing of cattle. I never thought I'd be here, George said quietly, happy again, whole again. We're not whole, Patricia corrected. We're healed. There's a difference. What difference? Whole means never broken. Healed means broken and put back together. Patricia leaned into him. We'll always have cracks, but the cracks let the light in. George turned her to face him, kissed her properly, deeply. A promise of the night to come, and all the nights after. Thank you, he whispered against her lips, for answering those ridiculous letters, for staying when you should have run, for loving us when we were unlovable. You were never unlovable, Patricia cupped his face. Just lost, and now you're found, They stood together in the lamplit kitchen. Outside, stars emerged one by one. Inside, the table waited for tomorrow's breakfast. 6 chairs, 6 places, 1 family. Built on lies that became truth, on desperation that became hope, on strangers who became home.